Okay, so let's discuss short about Android Auto, maybe see the difference between the two versions of the operating system, and then understand maybe why this evolution.
ITCS Pizzatime Podcast. Cheesy questions and juicy answers for the tech community.
Hi und willkommen zu einer neuen Episode des ITCS Pizzatime Tech Podcasts. Heute über intelligente Betriebssysteme in Autos. Wer kennt sie nicht? KIT oder Bumblebee. Autos, die besondere Fähigkeiten besitzen und uns im Alltag mit Rat und Tat zur Seite stehen. Doch wer dachte, dass das nur Fiktion ist? Tja, weit gefehlt. Zwar führen unsere Autos noch kein Eigenleben, aber das Betriebssystem Android Automotive OS bietet einige Fähigkeiten, die sich KIT oder Bumblebee gerne abgeschaut hätten. Marius Mailat, CTO von P3, stellt euch in der heutigen Folge dieses besagte Betriebssystem vor. Viel Spaß!
Thank you. I'm glad that I'm here with you. I have a really bold statement in my presentation. I'm trying the next half hour to present you around Android Automotive ecosystem, a lot of stuff which is possible, what I have done personally and my company. So, who is Marius? I'm the CTO of the P3. That's my company. I'm an alumni Google developer expert on Android since a lot of years. I develop in my 20 years experience more than 300 solutions, which are all of them front-facing applications. And I'm actively developing serious car having Android Automotive into it. Okay, so my company, short presentation, we are around 1,000 people. 75% of our colleagues are software engineers, and we develop from my Vodafone application to Bose Smart Home, going to the BMW dealership management and the new Renault HMI in the cars, which will start in 2022. Okay, so let's check the agenda and slowly go in what I want to tell you. So I will talk first about the IVI and the trends in the market. I will slowly focus on Android Auto and afterwards on Android Automotive OS, showing you the difference between the two of them. Then shortly with the Project Black to show an example of such an implementation. And at the end will not be a time for the Q&A, but I will give you a link where you can address me after the conference, some Q&As. So let's talk about the infotainment, vehicle, and automotive trends. So what is happening now in the market? Basically, the expectation from the user is higher than in the last years. Normally in a car, usually when you buy a car, at this moment, everything you have in the car is really old. So because the cycle process of developing such an IVI takes around 3 to 4 years, sometimes even 5 years, that means once you buy a car, it's already going to be really old. And I think also the car makers, they are slowly understanding this problem. But it's somehow in the last years, when you buy the latest car from an OEM, you usually have like only MP3 support and no USB. But the market was much more advanced. There are a lot of directions where the market is going. So, for example, one of the directions where the market is going is to the so-called one single SoC, where basically there is only one big computer in the car, which is going to serve most of the domains. This is what Tesla is doing, and a lot of other automakers, they are trying to adopt it. Of course, the connected car is something which is in everybody's mind, but the reality in the cars which are outside now is different. So most of the EV cars which are launched this year, they do not have any type of connectivity. And even when they are launching, they have no OTA over the air update. And you have to bring them still in the service and do an update. And this is different than basically what is the expectation from the end users. The end users are kind of used with modern phones. So on the iPhone, on Android, you have the night updates, you have system updates, you have access to the modern apps, you get daily updates even if something is crashing. You are all the time connected to different medias, you have access to social media, you have access to different information. And in the car, it's exactly the other way around. For everything you want to do in the car, you basically go to a service. You even pay now in some cars for the weather apps. So you pay a subscription of 10 euros in a German car maker, or you are forced to treat two or three apps. And as a normal user of a normal phone, you consider this a frustration because you expected much more. That's the problem which, in fact, Android Automotive tries to solve it. there are different platforms outside, and they've tried over the years to find maybe a similar solution. And most of you heard about the QNX, about the AGL, about the Windows Embedded, and about other systems. They all try in their ways to solve some kind of problem. And beside that, the OEM companies, they try together to organize communities like, for example, Genevieve Alliance, where this problem should be solved. And still in 2021, it is not solved for us, the end users. In every car you go now, it looks different. You have a different type of interface, you have different type of unrolling, and you usually miss all these features. Now, as a positive side, there are already signals that something is happening there. And one of the first OEMs to do this is Tesla. But not only Tesla, for example, Polestar. So Volvo with Polestar 2 is an extremely good example of a car rolling out with an Android automotive system, having an extremely cool experience in the car. And I remember that when I demoed first the car to an OEM, a group of people, they were surprised to see that basically the car will tell you where are the charging stations along the road, which is basically a functionality not going to be found in any of the other cars beside Tesla and Polestar. And this is a simple thing, but basically most of the IVI cars released last year, they do not even have a charging list. So basically you are running an electrical car and you are without electricity and you have no idea where to charge it. And you have to rely on your Google Maps or other type of charging app. So let's talk a little bit about Android. There is a small evolution behind Android. So everybody knows Android from the phones, from the mobile phones. There is a small evolution step, which is called Android Auto. And this should not be confused with Android Automotive, which is basically a mirroring technology, similar also with the Apple CarPlay. That means you have your phone, you link your phone to the car, and the car is able to mirror your screen. And in this way, overlay all the information from your phone to your car and allows you to have navigation, music, and other elements. And the third element is the Android Automotive OS, which is a full, completely HMI in the car. So think about like when you're using a Windows computer, you have a Windows installation. When you use a Mac, you have a Mac OS. And now in the car, you have basically another open source system. Above this system, you can build whatever type of interface you want. Okay, so let's discuss short about Android Auto. Maybe see the difference between the two versions of the operating system and then understand maybe why this evolution. So in Android Auto, there are some limited capabilities because, again, this is a mirror system. So you have access, for example, to messaging, so voice control interface. You can read, compose messages. You have access to audio. That means you can play a lot of media and browse, not only from USB, but from Spotify, from Audible, from different type of music. You are remaining all the time in the same interface. You basically don't change the interface of your media player, but you focus more on the content. So the media player will remain the same. You only change the source of content. And then the other functionalities inside of Android Auto. For example, you have Google Maps navigation, but not only Google Maps. There are already around 3,000 applications for Android Auto. So you can replace Google Maps with Waze if you prefer that, or other compatible navigation apps. You have a deep calendar integration. You have EV, electrical vehicle charging stations along the route. In the newest version of Android Auto, you have also charging apps and parking apps. And definitely one of the coolest things is the voice personal assistant. And it's planned for 2021, a lot of driving optimized applications, and they are on the way, and there are some partners which are selected exactly for this purpose. But even with Android Auto, which is some kind of old system, so it's there since a lot of years, even now, people, if they see how the Android Auto is working, they are kind of surprised already on that, because basically in a car running Android Auto, you just go in the car and you ask the car, hey, Google, please drive me to work. And you don't have to add nothing else because the car will know where to drive it. You do not talk about exact address book, you just talk about the location. So for example, I will say, drive me to the Czech 24 in Frankfurt without knowing where the address is, for example, if I want to drive there. There are around 3,000 applications in the market, and this number will increase. Okay, so let's think about the next step. So the next step, after working on Android Auto, at some point in 2016, I was at the Google I/O conference in San Francisco. And so you have to think about Google I/O. It's around 10,000 people. Most of them, 90%, they are developers. And in a corner of the conference was like an orange Maserati. with almost nobody near it. And I said, okay, why a car here in Google? What will be the purpose of this? And I started to talk with the engineers. They were basic engineers from Google and Qualcomm. And they were presenting an in-car concept at that time, running Android and controlling basically the car and the windshield. When I come back in 2016, I said, this is the future. This is something which will probably in 4 or 5 years will be mainstream, and we have to focus. And we started in 2016 to bet on this technology. And meanwhile, it proved to be a successful one. There are two ways of developing Android Automotive. At that time, when the Android Automotive came out, was just Android in the car, was just a split view, was just a simple basic version. Meanwhile, Google understand the needs of the market and all the OEMs and evolved the whole concept in a full-fledged HMI system, and not only HMI system, but also low-level middleware and also the lower part. So you basically get from out-of-the-box kernel, you get a low-level VHAL, you get services, you get permissions, security, and also templates how you develop the HMI. A few years ago, in 2018, the companies who were starting at that point to work on Android Automotive, they were kind of like considered crazy. And most of the Germans OEM, they were like totally against any type of Android Automotive, even in the press. This changed so dramatically in the last year. Why? Because one of the biggest alliances in this world, Renault, Mitsubishi, Nissan alliance, announced that all the cars starting 2022, they will run basically Android Automotive. And they started a project in 2018, basically towards this scope. The first version was presented last week by the CEO of Renault. So that's the first line. So the first car which was released is not Renault, it's Volvo Polestar, was released this summer. A little bit delayed with around 6 months than the original plan. And it runs an Intel-based processor with a complete Android Automotive. It's extremely interesting to see the feedback on the car from the German Auto.de and other companies which are just praising the car on the highest level because of the experience in the car, and of course also by the car itself. And these two are the main companies who committed themselves. Meanwhile, Google did an agreement with other companies. So the companies who committed themselves also on bringing Android Automotive is FCA, PSA, Ford, and the number continues to grow. In fact, from week to week, I'm kind of having an alert on Google because most of the time, every 2 weeks, there is a new company announcing they will jump on this. And even if the companies, they do not go with a GAS or Google Automotive Services system, they go with a pure Google layer where they try to build above it their own ecosystem. So that's why in the lower part of the graph, you can see companies like BMW, Mini, Jaguar, Land Rover, and so on. There are companies who will not use completely ecosystem from Google, but they will still use the basic version of Android Automotive OS. Again, and this will probably going to be outdated when the video will be out on the website. So just make sure you check it out, which OEM just jump on this boat. Okay, so maybe a little technical to go there, a technical slide. This is like a big architecture, so probably every developer will going to love this. It tries somehow to show which are the guess parts of the system, which are the elements which are provided by Google, which are the elements you can do on your own. But basically, and I got this question quite a lot, you can change everything in the platform. So Android open source platform is a platform you can change. You can change from design to whatever type of support. So if you envision a new way to interact in the car using, gesture, you can implement that. And for example, if you want to use a rotary pad in the car, you already have support for it. So not only that you have a lot of frameworks which are there, but you can extend it the way you want. Maybe a good example, I will give you an example of VPA. In the press, one of the German OEMs is in the press regarding the voice personal assistant, because once launched the car, it is not really working. Now, the platform here offers such a modular architecture which allows you to swap the hot words and to swap also the NLP behind it. That means if you are not happy with a certain implementation of your Hey OEM car, then you can swap it with other technology. So if this is done by another company or by in-house, you can swap it really easy. And this type of architecture propagates all over the whole Android Automotive platform, allow you to interchange parts of the platform or use what is there. So you can decide to use the Hey Google, Or you can decide to implement your own hot word for there. If that's Hey Jane or something else, you have this possibility. And the technology which you are using there is also free for you. So you can use models to train the hot word, or you can use other type of architecture. Okay, so what I see as a work stream, and basically where we are involved in the last series project, we usually, when you start in Android Automotive, you have to start with the concept development. So basically a consulting part where you are discussing about what are the potential hardware companies, because there are not so many out there. What type of challenges you have in front of you, integration of your existing native apps into the HMI. The second stream of work is usually the CI/CD, which is normally let's say in other type of projects, kind of more or less simple. But for an Android Automotive can be quite complex because you are working with a source code which is at least 200 giga of source code, and which you recompile every time to generate a new deliverable binary. The third one is the platform development, where basically BSP and the VHAL implementation is done. The fourth one is the implementation of the connected HMI, where basically you develop all the front-facing user apps, including equal, media player, dialer, app drawer, and so on. And you customize the whole system, operating system, to match your CI. So if you have a Dacia and a Renault, that's basically two types of brands which are addressing two different markets. And you have to adapt your HMI for both of them. And the last one is basically the testing. Since in Android Automotive, there is no end-to-end solution, so we are forced in the last year to create a tool basically to allow an end-to-end testing from the CAN bus side to the HMI and allow automatic tests to control both of them. So, okay. I told you about the 2016 revelation in San Francisco. So we started at that point to think about the Project Black. This is the name of our internal platform. And we put this on at that point, a Qualcomm 820 board, and we tried to develop it in a product. And we were after that with the Scion, the CSS in the second phase, where we have an implementation with a smart home case and Alexa integration and other features. And then, the 2021, we are now in a way that we work with Android Automotive OS 11. We can be independent of the hardware, so we run on the bare metal, but we also run as a hypervisor. And we have a full-fledged system with most of the HMI's app implemented. And also with a teaming system, which allows us very easy to go from one implementation to another one. Okay, so the phase 2 was bringing our system into the real car. And we have chosen to do this in our test car, which is a Smurf. And this is the version from those years, so 2017, 16, 17. So really a black version at that point. And meanwhile, we are, in this case, we have a bigger screen. We have a completely new operating system behind it with different elements, like, for example, widgets. So let me talk short about the software. The software is focused on Android Automotive OS 11. And we have a touchscreen of 13-inch, 4K mounted. We have a hypervisor via QNX or ACRN, depending on the hardware we have inside. We are Google Automotive Services ready for integration. That means when we demo, we show it as a ready for integration. We offer an end-to-end testing on this system, also based on the car simulator product. We have a voice personal assistant over it, which has an onboard processing. That means the NLP is completely on board done. And of course, we have other small elements like, for example, Heroes apps, RROs, and so on and so on. Okay, hardware, we run it on two different hardwares, on Qualcomm and Intel. And why we choose this? Because we want to match basically the hardware which is out there for the cars which are released or going to be released. Visually, I think it's quite appealing. So we have a widget-based system where every driver can customize as he wants. So for example, this is my own setup because on the left side, I have the whole sound control. If I want to push my music back to the girls in back of my car, I just move the red dot behind, so I don't have to go to 10 menus and choose back and so on. It's one move and the whole music is pushed behind. I can define the quick control. So for example, I want to have, for example, ESP and lane assist and so on direct on the first screen. I can define which feature I want them on the screen. And since I'm driving the IV car, then the IV will be for me also a widget. And also I prefer to have the navigation there. On the second screen, for example, there are other type of widgets. One of them, for example, is the parking. And so, for example, if the car is driving slow, automatically the parking around you will be shown and will show you towards which of these to go. The media player is also consistent layout. That means if you choose Spotify, Deezer, or whatever other media player, the interface will be exactly the same, only the content will be changed. For you as a user, you don't have to relearn every time a new interface, will be kind of the same every time. It comes, of course, with a companion app, which allows you to control the car in offline and online mode and have complete control over all the functionalities in the car. And you can control definitely the doors, you control energy and so on, but basically have almost full complete control over the companion app. Okay, so yeah, we have a demo setup where we can demo this system. So it took us also quite a lot of time to create such a system, but it's basically a complete integration. So if this system runs in the car or separately this is now, it's in fact no difference. It's the same operating system. About the architecture, we consider splitting it, of course, using different domains. But our purpose is basically to go towards a direction where we have one single SoC, one big computer running in the car, which will control everything. In our case, it can control on the head unit, we're using the Android Automotive, the IVI. It can control the cluster display as a dumb screen and without the need to have there a Linux or QNX. It can control the rear seat, allowing there to have an Android TV, which is completely separate for each users. Again, my example, I have two girls. They usually want to watch something different if they are behind it. So also because of the age, so they can have two instances of the same operating system or application. This is basic architecture, which most of the OEMs, they are going slowly adapted. It is not only modern, but also allows you to swap very easy the hardware, which is most of the biggest problem now. So you can swap very easy the hardware. The whole emulated system remains the same. And it somehow mirrors the same technology with virtual machines in the computer world. Okay, cool. That's the end of my presentation. So, of course, this whole knowledge about Android Automotive OS, we try to put it somewhere. And I'm working with 5 colleagues to finish our book, which will going probably to be released in January, if not February. Website is androidautomotivebook.com. Take a look if you want. If you have any questions, scan the QR code, drop me an email. I will be glad to respond to you. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Marius, für den spannenden Vortrag. Android Automotive OS will conquer your car. Apropos Conquer, welches Gimmick im Auto hat euer Herz erobert, welches ihr nicht mehr missen wollt? Schreibt uns, folgt uns auf Instagram und abonniert den ITCS Pizzatime Tech Podcast. Und wir hören uns wie gewohnt nächste Woche zu einer neuen und frisch servierten Episode. Ciao!
ITCS Pizzatime Podcast.